Trump announces that he will be indicted on Tuesday. Oddly specific. A Russian Su-27 is nearly destroyed in combat with an unarmed drone. Regulators and bankers work to shore up European banks. And protests in France and England are getting even larger. CNN reports just hours ago that an Atlanta prosecutor is considering RICO charges against Trump. And, oh yeah, it looks like Trump might get indicted tomorrow. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. This is the Rundown for March 20th, 2023. The Dow Jones is up more than 300 points at the hour as investors maintain a cautious optimism about the possibility of reversing the burgeoning bank crisis. First Republic Bank in California continues to be hemorrhaging, and its credit rating was cut earlier by Standard & Poor's. At this point, it's not certain if the bank will even survive the week. Credit Suisse, which is headquartered in Zurich and is one of the 9 global so-called bulge bracket banks, has now lost, actually, let's get into how much it has first, has roughly $1.3 trillion in assets and looked like it was suffering contagion from the lack of trust in the banking system, and this prompted the Swiss government to force UBS to purchase Credit Suisse for $3.25 billion in order to increase their liquidity and stave off damage as a result of runs on the bank. As part of this deal, Tier 1 bonds were written down to zero, Tier 1 being the ones that are the most dangerous. They are the ones that are first to get wiped out if something goes wrong. This is resulting in a loss of investments to investors at the bank of roughly $17 billion and is the single largest loss inflicted to Tier 1 assets since the financial crisis of 2008. Strikes and protests have been sweeping across Europe, protesting low wages, adverse working conditions, or governmental policies. Travel and services are being affected across the continent. Last month, a full-day strike halted all airline operations across Germany. Air traffic controllers in Spain, as well as ground handling services in Zurich, also began rolling strikes. Baggage handlers, railway staff, and transportation workers in Italy have also begun striking. For nearly a week now, thousands of protesters have been clashing with police in Paris as strikes and civil unrest have grown across the country. The latest round of protests were sparked when President... oh, dear Lord. Why is my brain not... Macron, thank you. Wow. When he pushed a raise in the state pension through without consulting the legislature. And this has, he didn't get a vote in Parliament. This has outraged French citizens, and police have responded using riot gear and tear gas, as nearly 40% of the operational staff at French refinery and depots were on strike, and rolling strikes continue across French railways. In England, teachers' unions have been holding out for increases in pay. They have had a salary dispute with the government and are now actually in what is being described as, quote, intense talks. More than half of the schools in England were closed or restricted for at least 2 days last week, prompting the government to agree to negotiate if the teachers would go back to work. Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court in The Hague has issued arrest warrants for Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russia's communist. Wow. Getting a different kind of show today. Commissioner of Children's Rights. This is real. I double-checked. This is real. Russia's Commissioner of Human Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova. It's right. Because Russia is not a member of the International Criminal Court, the court does not have jurisdiction there, and because the court won't try somebody in absentia, it's unlikely that either of these two will ever face trial. However, it's seen as an important attempt to increase pressure on Russia and to let them know that the UN is watching, and that for people who may not be as well insulated and protected as Putin, there could easily be consequences. They are attempting to get Russia to maybe dial back the war crimes a bit. Probably would be nice. And it is also intended to slow the exportation and sexual exploitation of Ukrainian children who are being kidnapped and exported to Russia, in some cases for adoption, in some cases to be sold into sexual slavery. 2 Russian Su-27s engaged with an American MQ-9 Reaper unmanned aerial vehicle. It appears they were attempting to down it by, without actually like firing missiles at it. They were going to down it by dousing it in gasoline and jet fuel. So they dumped their jet fuel over the drone and then presumably attempted to ignite it using their afterburners. The drone won in the end. They collided with it. We don't know the damage to the aircraft, but we do know that this did cause the drone to crash. The drone, completely unarmed, managed to damage a high-end Russian aircraft. Well done. On February 14th, oh yes, okay. Yeah, so February 14th, the year would be nice. All right. That's another story. So, we're going to go back in time a little bit. On February 14th of 1979, members of Iran's People's Fadi guerrillas stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, captured a Marine named Kenneth Krause, and took him hostage. The Ambassador William H. Sullivan surrendered the U.S. Embassy to the guerrillas in exchange for Krause's life. The embassy was returned by the government of Iran 3 hours after the incident happened. There was a second attempt to take the embassy several months later, but the planners decided that, well, gee, we should probably have more than 5 people if we're going to try to pull this off, and they were unable to get the number of people and resources needed to do it. 2 months after that, on November 4th, 1979, there was a third attempt to take the U.S. Embassy in Iran. It actually was not a pre-planned one, to the best of our understanding. Islamist students and revolutionaries who were loyal to Ayatollah Khomeini had been protesting in front of the embassy, and they started to press up against the gate. They broke in and seized the embassy in Tehran. 6 embassy employees managed to escape and hid in the home of Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor, who put his life very much in jeopardy hiding those 6. They were actually rescued when CIA agent Ben Affleck infiltrated Iran under the guise of making a science fiction movie in a scheme which was later popularized by Ben Affleck, who wrote, produced, and starred in the movie Argo. about the rescue of the Americans that were hiding in the home of the Canadian ambassador. Meanwhile, where 66 Americans had originally been taken hostage, a number were either freed, escaped, one had medical concerns, and he was released for humanitarian reasons, leaving 52 hostages, which were held in Iran up to 44 days, up until January 19th, up until January 1981. The date they were released is interesting. Now, the protests that had sparked all of this were in response to the U.S.'s continued support of the Shah. The Shah was a dictator and puppet installed by the U.S., overthrowing the democratically elected government in 1953. The Shah had been expelled in a revolution and was seeking treatment for lymphoma. The U.S. agreed to allow him to come and get that treatment, and many Iranians thought that this was grossly inappropriate to do with a dictator and provide shelter de facto simply because he had a medical condition and was there and was now evading trial. But they were also concerned that the Carter administration was going to attempt to initiate another coup and reinstall the Shah as their puppet dictator. Tensions were high. When the 44 hostages were taken, 52. I don't know why I said 44. 52 hostages were taken. There was immediately a ransom note saying that if the U.S. turned over the Shah so he could be tried, all the hostages would be released unharmed. This struck a catastrophic blow to the Carter administration. He was running for re-election, and against the advice of senior members of his own cabinet and intelligence communities, had agreed to let the Shah come. This triggered the protests and the eventual fall of the U.S. Embassy, and it was seen as weakness on his part because he couldn't free the hostages, he couldn't get the embassy back, and he wasn't going to release the Shah. He was stuck in a no-win scenario. An actor by the name of Ronald Reagan was running for president and was seen as a strong pro-American alternative. He eventually won the presidential race and was inaugurated on January 20th, 1981. His inaugural address lasted 20 minutes, and within hours of that address, all of the hostages were released. This has sparked a lot of controversy and conspiracy theories over the fact that maybe Reagan's camp had something to do with the timing of the release of the hostages. No evidence was found, and there were thorough investigations. Last week, Ben Barnes, a Texas politician, former lieutenant governor, and the youngest speaker of the House of Representatives in Texas, came out and said that at the behest of Reagan campaign chairman William J. Casey, he accompanied former Texas governor and presidential candidate John B. Connally to Iran with the express purpose of undermining Jimmy Carter's attempts to free the hostages. He said that they met with religious leaders in Iran and with leaders of the revolution and were able to negotiate a settlement whereby the hostages would be released only after Ronald Reagan had won, thereby keeping the so-called albatross around Carter's neck. That's a stunning revelation to just drop out there, but he has given now a series of interviews. He said, quote, "I think it is so significant, and I guess knowing that the end is near for President Carter, who has been put into hospice, put it in my mind more and more. I just feel like we've got to get it down in some way." He turns 85 himself next month. Now, there is a question that should be asked, including of those who are, by those who are very critical of Ronald Reagan and already inclined to distrust him, which is there any evidence that this is true? Well, Barnes is a respected politician. Again, he was lieutenant governor and he was the youngest Speaker of the House. He has no motive to lie about this and every motive not to say anything, because this is going to get him into a shit ton of trouble, presumably, depending on whether or not people want to look into it. I don't know if there's a statute of limitations on the Logan Act, but all that notwithstanding, he also had actually told a number of people in his life, including a former director of the CIA, what he had done and how it had happened. And those people have been reached out to by the New York Times, and they have confirmed that he had told them over the last 20 years that, in fact, this is what he had done. So finding a paper trail or any specific evidence may be a little hard to do, but it does seem rather compelling. It explains a few things, and it was certainly suspected at the time, though nothing was proven. So let's see. And then there's a thing happening in the U.S., which is Trump is expected to be indicted tomorrow. We're going to dissect that in just a minute. I also do want to quickly dissect why I think this revelation about the Carter administration and the Reagan administration is so important. We've been discussing on the Discord whether or not it's sedition or treason. I had gone down the treason path. It was sedition. That much I knew. Is it also treason? I had said yes. I am dissuaded from that now. I don't think you can make the argument at all for treason. It's sedition. Fine. You've got them on sedition, and you've got them on violation of the Logan Act, which is extraordinarily serious. You have American citizens who are talking to a hostile foreign government. How hostile? Good question. It was a new government. It had overthrown a government that was friendly to us and that we had, in fact, installed. So I think you could say they're hostile. And asked them to keep hostages for one reason, and American hostages. Some of them diplomats, and some of them the diplomats' families, who had already been there for over a year. Keep them hostage to ruin the chances of a political opponent. We believe at this point that it goes all the way up to the campaign manager of the Reagan campaign, because that's what Burns says. If it goes up that far, it's hard to imagine that Reagan didn't know, but we don't know. And evidence on this is scant so far. It's really just the word of one guy. Obviously, I'm inclined to believe it for the reasons I just outlined, but what that means is it's the reason the Logan Act was made was because somebody thought it should probably be illegal for U.S. citizens to undermine U.S. foreign policy abroad. It may be that you disagree with that policy, but if Americans were allowed to just negotiate their own policy a la Elon Musk, you would end up with a government that was paralyzed and incapable of moving because individual citizens and or governors of individual states or whatever might attempt to do their own foreign policy. So, hence you have the Logan Act. We've seen all sorts of shocking things, and we know that illegal things happen. We know that illegal things happen in campaigns, and we know that this probably isn't even the worst of it, but it's unfortunate to hear that a president who was actually well esteemed in the eyes of history may have co-conspired to, at least after the fact, in the kidnapping of those people and keeping them in Iran. They were at the embassy for a while, but they kept escaping. Members they dwindled down from 66, I think, to 52 through escapes and various other things. They finally moved them to prison. So these guys spent a year in an Iranian prison. I'm aware that in the grand scheme of the United States, the lives of those men is probably reasonably insignificant. Isn't to their families, but I'm aware that in the eyes of history may have been. But the president is supposed to do the right thing. And if you're running for president, this is a shocking revelation. Anyways, I've spent enough time on it. I appreciate everyone indulging me. It's just one of those wow moments. So, Donald Trump. We're going to have to dissect this a bit, and then I will get to the live chat, because I want to make sure we cover any questions that anybody has to the best of our ability to do it. We've been following Donald Trump and his revelation that he, at least in his view, is going to be indicted tomorrow. There's a lot to unpack there and to discuss. We're going to try to do that reasonably quickly. This is a news summary show, not an in-depth dive, but I think since we're right in the middle of it, and since this may be a very, very interesting week in the U.S., we're going to have to talk about it, and we want to make sure that you guys understand what we know so far and what's true and false. First of all, I will take this opportunity to say that a lot is happening quickly. New York has been deploying barricades. They are getting ready for the potential for mass protests. We've been following that. Social media has been alive and just all over the place. Trump has been out on social media saying some pretty outrageous things. We're following all of that. That's been being dropped on our Discord. We have channels just to discuss this kind of news. So if you're interested in following it in real time, come on in, join us, check it out, and maybe drop a few articles yourself if there's anything that you want to discuss. But when this first broke, all we knew was that the DA did anticipate a indictment coming at some point in the future and had spoken with Trump's team, including presumably the Secret Service, about it. We later learned we confirmed that he had in fact talked to the Secret Service. We had assumed that that's where Trump got the information from. One of Trump's representatives told him, look, the Secret Service is going to have some meetings about this, and you should be prepared for the possibility you're going to have to go to New York. Why Tuesday? We did not know. The DA doesn't do the indictment. So people have been saying, well, the DA must have decided to indict, but he's holding on to the DA does not have any say in the matter. It's done by a jury, a grand jury, and they decide on the indictment, which is why so many of the claims, and we're going to get into so many of the claims that, oh my God, this indictment is being brought down by a obviously biased and unjust prosecutor. The Constitution specifically deals with that and prevents it by saying that it has to be brought down by a jury of Trump's peers. That's the final conviction is, and in this case, certainly the indictment will be as well. What's he presumably going to be indicted for? All right. Most of this, everybody knows. It goes all the way back to Michael Cohen. Trump had an affair with a porn star, the president of the United States. I'm going to need a minute. Trump had an affair with a porn star. He decided that he didn't want her talking about it. Looks, I guess I get it. If you're running for president, that kind of thing, especially if you're married, So he decided to pay her off. None of that is illegal, believe it or not. And it makes sense. People sign NDAs all the time. If you know company secrets, or if you're going to be made privy to company secrets, you may sign an NDA beforehand, or you may, after a huge lawsuit, listen, we'll give you some extra money, but we don't want you to talk about this lawsuit, or we don't want you to say nasty things about the opponent on the other side. And these kinds of things are actually common. A non-disparagement agreement, which is, I realized NDA also, but NDA stands for non-disclosure, but the non-disparagement as well. Any number of similar agreements. It's not illegal, and it's not illegal even if it was done by writing out a check to a porn star and asking her to not talk about the fact that she was having sex with Trump, which, to be fair, I wouldn't want to talk about very much either. If I was her, probably would have paid to not be forced to talk about it. Reliving trauma and such. At any rate, so none of that's illegal. So where's the problem? Well, there's a couple of problems. The first problem is, if he used campaign funds, or if this was reimbursed out of campaign funds, it's a campaign finance violation. It's extraordinarily serious. The New York DA has nothing to do with any of that. That's handled by the federal government, and they basically declined to prosecute. If at this point they went after, I think they should have. I think they were terrified of prosecuting for all of the reasons that we've been talking about on the indictment of a former president. They absolutely should have. They lost the opportunity. If they do it now, yeah, it's probably within the statute. I'm sure they could do it, but it's going to look like it's politically motivated. It's the Biden administration. We got into office, and now we're going to prosecute Trump on previous charges that the Justice Department had already declined. So he is not going to get charged on that. I find that highly unlikely. And at this point, honestly, he shouldn't be, because too much time has passed, in my view. He should have been originally. You don't get a second bite at the apple. They chose not to. It's done. So he's not going to get hit on anything campaign finance related. So what is he getting hit on? Well, something reasonably minor, actually. He reported the money. So he had Cohen pay her off. He then reimbursed Cohen. That reimbursement he had listed as a legal expense. He was paying his lawyer for legal services. That isn't true. That expense, I'm not sure. Listen, I go to H&R Block, right? It's been a while since I've actually done my own taxes. I don't know where the paying off the hooker to keep her mouth shut goes on like line item. If you're sitting there making deductions, okay, the IRS code is huge. If you've ever, it's like a room, right? So I don't know where, and I say hooker, it was porn star. Very sorry, and you got to be careful with these things because there may be a different line item deduction for porn stars versus hookers. You never know. Ask Trump if you're. This isn't my area of expertise. At any rate, he wasn't. The one thing I do know is the money wasn't for legal expenses. So that's what they are hitting him on. Now he filed forms with the state where he had that money listed as legal expenses. That was not true. Boom, they're going to get him on all these sorts of things. So does any of this matter? And what's the likelihood that they're going to get him? And we're learning more about this every minute, literally. And we've learned a few things since last night's show where we sort of speculated the how and the why. And so we're going to have to update some of our predictions and speculations based on what we now know. First of all, we've learned that Trump did not hear from the Secret Service or any of his internal people about the preparations to have him indicted. I don't know how or why. Maybe they felt that they weren't going to talk to him about it. The Secret Service kept it to themselves. Fine. He read it in the New York Times. He misread the New York Times article and decided that Trump is reading the New York Times and he's, I've never done mescaline, but I have to believe this is what it's like. At any rate, so Trump reads the New York Times, and what surprises me isn't that it's the New York Times and the most important liberal newspaper. What surprises me is he was reading. So he's reading the New York Times, and he reads an article that says that he could be indicted as soon as Tuesday, and we've now learned about that, and we've learned a bit more, both about the charges and the grand jury. We know that there are two witnesses still outstanding in the grand jury. One of them is testifying today, depending on how long it takes. The other one may or may not go today. If not, the other one will go tomorrow, and it will be sent over to the jury no later than tomorrow. That's the expectation, unless something happens. Ergo, the soonest he could possibly be indicted would be tomorrow. That's what they meant. That's what was written. But they made the mistake of putting it in writing instead of sock puppets, so Trump had a hard time accurately deducing the information. I have a little hostility towards the man. At any rate. So, and then that set off this whole furor. Is it possible he's going to get indicted? Yes. Is it likely? At this point, we're not entirely sure how likely. It really depends on what the grand jury wants to do. It is a distinct possibility. It's possible it could happen any time this week. It's possible it could take a couple of weeks, especially if there are, surprise other witnesses or anything. We're not expecting any of that. The reality is, in my view, it will probably be this week. Tomorrow is a distinct possibility. That is what we have. So, which is one of the reasons too. Yesterday, we were very clear about the fact that even though Trump says he's going to be indicted, he has no way of knowing that. So he was shocked, big shocker. Didn't have any idea what he was talking about. So we're going to find out tomorrow. We do expect that there's going to be an indictment. There is a lot of legal speculation now on all sorts of things pertaining to this. The bar for an indictment is very low. It's just, do they think they could actually have a successful prosecution? You don't have to prosecute it. You just have to, is a successful prosecution possible? If the answer to that is yes, boom, they go for the try to prosecute the guy. So, and there, the burden of proof is, in a criminal case, it's going to be beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's going to be beyond a preponderance of the evidence. But for an indictment, it's obviously the lowest bar possible. So that's where we are. His rhetoric has been astonishing. He has said a number of things. Let's see. And he's just, stuff is coming out. It appears as if what he's attempting to do is he's attempting to incite a considerable amount of violence in New York and violence against anybody who's saying he's guilty or that this should happen. It looks as if right now it's not working. We believe that the reason is, and we discussed this yesterday, but it looks like it's panning out that there was enough prosecutions and they were taken seriously enough with January 6th, thank God, that people are now saying, do I really want to go to jail for a year or more to go out and protest this, maybe start a fight, maybe, yeah. So we think that those prosecutions are slowing down people's interest in this. There's been some talk of surrounding Mar-a-Lago with armed MAGA who will create their own little fiefdom, I guess. And, this is sounding more like the Branch Davidians every friggin' day. Quote, can you imagine the great New York City Police Department, correctly referred to as New York City's finest, who, for the first and only time in history, endorsed a president? No, that's a lie. It's not really a lie. In order for it to be a lie, he has to know it's false. I don't think he knows a great deal in general. Me. Oh, he was talking about himself. Thanks for the clarification there. I wouldn't have figured it out if you hadn't put that line in, so thank you. For the first and only time in history, endorsed a president, me, and honored me as Man of the Year, having to defend and protect the defunders and cop haters of the radical left that want to put their greatest champion and friend in prison for a crime that doesn't exist. It's not Shakespeare. I'll just be honest. Did he say whale? All the whale? No, he said all the while. Okay. Would any of us have been shocked? The Soros-backed DA allows murderers and other violent criminals to freely roam the sidewalks of New York? Question mark. That was a question. That was a question. That was a question. That was actually only one sentence, too. Dear Lord. All right. So, listen. He's being indicted by a jury, not by the DA. I can see arguments why maybe the DA shouldn't have brought the charges, because it's a bit of a fine line putting down, that this was a legal expense. In one aspect, that's actually arguable. You could argue that it was a legal expense because Stormy Daniels was a potential legal problem, and that was an expense in keeping her quiet. I'm not a fan of that argument, but it's arguable. And if the burden of proof is going to be beyond a reasonable doubt, he may get off on this one. That's actually okay. This is a small potatoes. This is the perfect thing to bring out first. He is being looked at for RICO violations in Atlanta, Georgia. Again, CNN just brought that out earlier today. Today has been crazy. Come to the Discord. It's crazy. So, I suspect that the IRS is going to speed up their investigation of him now. They want to be done with this, and they don't want to be the last person to indict him. This is going to open up the floodgates. I strongly believe we are going to see an indictment a month now going forward for like 8 months. There's a couple of other grand juries that we know are already out. We know they're thinking about looking at him for the, there's a separate grand jury just on the fake electors. There's a grand jury on pressuring the Georgian state attorney, Secretary of State, to overturn the election. Bribery threats there. He's got the Deutsche Bank issue, which is money laundering, and I think they've got him dead to rights on that one. He's got a lot of problems. And this is to say nothing of Letitia James, I think it is, who has made it her mission to obliterate the Donald Trump organization. And looking at what she's done, how she's framed it, and the way she's taking her shot, I think she's going to make it. I think the odds are very good she's going to make it. So, don't hang your hat on this. The biggest concern I have over the next few days is what's he going to say, who's going to back him, and who's not. Quote, "It's time. We are a nation in steep decline, being led into World War III by a crooked politician who doesn't even know he's alive, but who is," that was an interesting use of a comma, "but who is surrounded by evil and sinister people." Evil and sinister are the same thing. Who, based on their actions on defunding the police, destroying our military, open borders, no voter ID, inflation, rising taxes, and much more, can only hate our now failing USA. We can't just allow this anymore. They are killing our nation as we sit back and watch. We must save America. Protest, protest, protest. Okay, I've been joking a lot about this. Donald Trump is not a joke. This rhetoric is not a joke, making fun of the fact that he uses two synonymous words in right next to each other is not a joke. I joke because it's that or cry, but the Manhattan District Attorney has now been taking precautions to fortify their offices. He's been speaking with all of his staff, and they've been preparing for, unfortunately, what could be a great deal of violence. I'm cautiously optimistic, judging by what we're looking at now, that there won't be. But this is where I think... Thank you, Titan. This is, I think, where the rubber is going to meet the road. The Speaker of the House owes his speakership to Donald Trump. He has come out and demanded that the DA justify why, he doesn't justify himself to Congress. He really fucking doesn't. And the Speaker of the House is saying we don't want political interference in investigations. Yeah, so why is he stepping into the DA's investigation? This will all come out, and he's going to be tried the way he gets to be in this country, which is by a jury of his peers. So... Oh, all right, thank you. So that's what he's going to get. And Marjorie Taylor Greene came out. Let's see. It's the whole. Let me see if I can find Marjorie Taylor Greene's statement. And at this point, I mean, everybody. Newt Gingrich has come out. I didn't realize he was still alive. Newt Gingrich arresting the President Trump over a 2016 event, which is of dubious illegality. Honestly, he's not entirely wrong about that. I'll give it to him. But that's still not my call. That's the TA's call. Actually, it's the jury's call. Is a sign of the left's insanity. To arrest a former and future president is an act of hatred and poison that will only further harden support for Trump while discrediting the left. Remember Hunter Biden, to which Keith Olbermann replied, "Newt, you tried to impeach Clinton. He kept his job. You lost yours. You've been out of your depth for 30 years. Sit down and don't open your mouth again." I am not a fan of Keith Olbermann for being a little overly, that statement's correct. Let's see, where was Marjorie Taylor Greene? Nope, okay. I'll see if I can catch the Marjorie Taylor Greene before we wrap up, because that one was unhinged. We've got a whole bunch. What I'm going to do, though, real quick, I want to take one step back just because we're going to end on Trump. So this is worthwhile. It turns out, and we've got this from Angela Fay in the side chat. So thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. France Live updates. Macron's government has now survived a no confidence vote. Wow. We said earlier he was increasing the retirement age. He was going from 62 to 64. That has become law, and there was a no confidence vote. It appears to get him booted from office, but he survived. I don't know how long before they can try again, but my suspicion is things are going to increase in France. So thank you, Angela. That was worth having. I appreciate it. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Thank you, Titan. We don't need to protest about the communists, Democrats. I'm a writer. I'm sorry. Okay, I get triggered. The S, then the semicolon, is the only way to indicate a plural and a possessive at the same time. There's no other way to do it. I don't care what anyone says. Also, boys and girls, use your Oxford commas. They're really important. Otherwise, you have Obama marrying Fidel Castro at a gay ceremony. And those of you who follow the news and follow know exactly what I mean by that. And if not, join us on the Discord. I'll tell you, because that was fun. Best gay wedding ever. Obama, Fidel. Anyways, we don't need to protest about the communists. Wow. Communists, Democrats' plans to arrest President Trump and the political weaponization of our government and election interference. These idiots are sealing their own fate in 2024 because the silent majority has two feelings right now about, what was the rest of that? About the current regime. Fear and anger. That is the most powerful combination when election time comes. Yes. Yes, it is. And you know that, which is why you say these things. And why we have the most divided time in the United States since the Civil War. The Democrats are the driving force with their own corrupt actions. All right. So, yeah, it's crazy. We're getting there's a lot of back and forth between pundits, and this is the first time in a while where, yeah, they're all still speaking punditese and still speaking knowing that there's a public watching. But there's some serious back and forth where they're just like, okay, we're putting this down and the gloves are coming off. Steve Bannon has come out and he's going after the DeSantis. The DeSantis people are going to speak up. And I think for a hot minute, everybody's going to put down, oh, hey, we're being watched by the public, and you're going to start to see some real sparks fly. At any rate, that's it. So we're going to keep an eye on the next couple of days, see what happens. I am cautiously optimistic that we are not looking at any significant amount of violence, and I think that's basically actually really just due to the work of the January 6th committee and the number of prosecutions that happened as quickly as they did. Having said that, we'll see once Trump is arrested. For those of you interested, the procedure is going to be as follows. Assuming an indictment comes, which I think the chances are far greater than not that he's going to be indicted, the Secret Service is going to be notified. They're going to take him down to the courthouse. He's going to have his own, and the courthouse is already preparing. He's going to come in the back way. He's going to have his own security escort. They will probably clear every hallway he's going to be in. They're going to clear the room where he's going to get fingerprinted. He's got to go down to the police station first. He gets fingerprinted. He gets a mugshot. He goes before a judge. And this will be planned too, that he's going to be going before a judge. All the judges know he's coming. They've already made up their minds as to what they're going to do. And I don't fathom any of them doing anything other than ROR, released on your own recognizance, meaning, yeah, we don't need a bond. We can find you if we have to. And it's genuinely not that big a deal. Again, this isn't, guys, he filed some tax forms wrong. It's not like he did seditious conspiracy or instigating violence or, I don't know, standing idly by as people are talking about hanging the vice president of the United States. It's not like that's on the table today. This is one, but this is the perfect one to start with. This is perfect. We'll see what happens, and that way, too, the discussion is much more on procedure. And when they start coming in earnest, anyone who wants to protest would do it on this one. And this is the best one to do it on. When they get serious, everyone would already have protested if they were going to do it. So this is good, but there's a lot going on. So I'm going to quickly check the live chat. This went a little longer than I had planned. I'll confess, a little triggered by some of this and a little over caffeinated, which make me just delightful. Let's see. So where? Oh, dear Lord. And thank you guys for everything that you passed on. I appreciate it. We do have a Discord. We follow this and every other story that we talk about on the show. In fact, that Discord is used to help sort out what shows, sort out the news for shows in the future. And also, just as an FYI, tomorrow we're going to have on Commander Lance McMillan and his Andering. We're going to be breaking down Peter 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬's take that China will collapse within this decade. It won't survive the end of the decade. He has 3 reasons why. As with our last Peter 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬 video, we've already looked at it, each of us individually, and I have to tell you, as we felt last time, he does know what he's talking about, but we're going to have some questions. So we're going to sit down and look at it. Will China last the end of the decade? That's going to be an interesting one. Tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Thursday, we're going to have on Commander Lance McMillan to discuss. It's just going to be a casual hang. These casual hangs range on anything from, we sometimes talk about, of course, Ukraine war and stuff like that, and sometimes we talk about illicit relations with hippos. You never know. It runs the gamut. I hope he doesn't watch this episode. I'm gonna have to let him go for that one, because I just know every time I bring that up, it's just one more notch, and he does not forget. He does not forget. He's a patient man. So I got to get him back. All our shows are time, overtime, in time. The show where I get 5 minutes to talk about any subject I want to, nick of time. I mean, come on. So I told him we should do another show. What does he say? Oh, yeah, let's call it Waste of Time. And he's a friend of mine. Hate to see my enemies. All right. So let's go check out the live chat. Then we're going to have Operator Starsky on Friday. And those are always going to be some good shows. And we're expecting that to start to change soon. So there has been a lot going on in the live chat. Geostrimmer, when they get Trump's fingerprints, he's so greasy, I don't even think they'll need ink. Probably true. Well, yeah, the problem is, though, it's like the McDonald's food, right? So he's going to actually make the paper transparent. He puts his finger on it, and the paper's going to go, where's the... Okay. Michael Ferguson, hello. Thank you all for joining us. Heather Fitzgibbon, thank you. It's good to see you. Good to see everyone who's coming. We try to do these every Monday, get you caught up with what happened last week so that you can get a running start on next week. Bjorn Heitmeyer, follower, thank you so much. We really appreciate the support. February 14th. Oh, that was one. Oh, that's right. All right. We get demonetized. We get demonetized a lot for a lot of different reasons. And I've had my camera a little high that whole time, but there you go. We get demonetized a lot. We talk about some pretty serious issues here. So we really rely on our supporters. We're not going to get much from ad revenue. YouTube does not like the more serious content. They prefer unboxing videos. So, question: If we do all of our serious content but put it in a box and then open it, would we not get demonetized? We're going to have to look into that. I have a hard time thinking we could cover the genocide in Ukraine that way, but it might be worth a shot. I'll talk to the marketing guys. Uh, sneaks a seat into the naughty. Stephanie Helms, good to see you. Good to see. I normally I try not to, for these shows. We try to make it quick because it's a 45-minute show. It's just this is what happened. The Trump thing. There was no way to not talk about that and not try to give you guys some perspective. Could this go all the way to the Supreme Court? No, not this one. This isn't going anywhere near the Supreme Court. Good question, but it's not going to. The Supreme Court. I would be stunned. I mean, I guess it could, technically anything could, but you go to the Supreme Court when there's a question of law and how the law is applied and or procedure or, somebody misapplying the law, anything like that. That's when you end up going to the Supreme Court. Nobody's questioning any of these things right now. And the Stormy Daniels thing is so small that could be totally interpreted in just the right way. The Stormy Daniels thing is so small that nobody really wants to prosecute it. That's bad. Okay. All right. It's not. I think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to go to the Supreme Court. We are looking at the Supreme. There's going to be some big ones on the Supreme Court. The ones I'm most concerned about have to do with campaign finance and or. What was the other big one? There's a huge one that, one of the biggies that I'm most concerned about, and I forget where this is on the Supreme Court. I've got to go look at that. We've been busy, but whether or not, and I think the court may be down on this one, but whether or not the Constitution allows state legislators full unchecked control to draw district maps. And if the answer to that is yes, there's going to be a massive change in the United States. And I mean a massive change, because that means whoever is in the legislature can redraw a district so that all of their political opponents are kicked out. And the political opponents do not have a single constitutional grounds on which to defend themselves. They don't have any rights when it comes to that. And the people don't have any rights when it comes to having a fair system. And there is no oversight because the U.S. Supreme Court has said, nope, the Constitution says so. That's one of the biggies. So we're going to see, and that one actually comes in several parts. That's not a single case. We'll get to it. That's its own show. So that's what we're looking at. Was Trump blackmailed into paying, or did he offer to keep quiet? That's a really good question. That's a very good question, and that makes these kinds of things very difficult because either is possible. Stormy Daniels strikes me as reasonably credible. I don't think should have done it, but I'm not her bestest buddy, so I don't know. There does appear to be a pattern of him paying off people. That could actually work in his favor when this goes to trial, because if it's a pattern of doing that to avoid legal problems, then maybe you could argue it's a legal expense. We know he paid off, I forget who the other, I think it was a Playboy Bunny. He's paid off a lot of people. And it is possible that you meet Trump and then you sit there and you say, oh, I've got something he wants. Maybe I can get a little money out of it. And you end up blackmailing him. I'm disinclined to think that that was happening in most of these cases because it takes some fucking cojones to try to blackmail somebody who's got that much money. So my suspicion is most of these were offered, but a suspicion isn't admissible evidence. So we'll see. They may claim. I don't know what they're going to claim. We'll see. I'm glad you asked that question. That is exactly the kind of question that if you're going to look at this, you have to ask. So good question. Will Trump be able to run again? This will not impede him from running. The thing that may is some rogue president signed a act into law about nuclear secrets and basically said that if you've mishandled nuclear secrets, you cannot hold any government office at all. That law was signed by Donald J. Trump. So if they get him on that, he's done. And here's the practical reality. Everything I've just said to you about upcoming future indictments, Every Republican political operative knows it. That's not a big secret. It's crystal clear. This is the dam breaking. They will do everything they can do to keep him from being the nominee. Even DeSantis, if DeSantis got the nomination right now and they did everything they could to rehabilitate their image, they've got a very serious problem. Biden has to do one thing to win. Shut up. That's it. Just don't do nothing wrong. Don't fuck anything up. That's all he has to do. Now, having said that, it's Biden. We'll see. But that's all he has to do to win right now. And they know it. So they have to figure out how they get their house in order. And the fastest way to get their house in order is kick Trump to the curb. So how do you do that without violating his right to run as and all? They're in trouble. They're in very big trouble. And I think they're about to have an internal civil war, the likes of which is going to require just massive doses of popcorn. Let's see, as long as he can't run again, so we'll see. Not going to lie. Yeah, we'll see. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, there's going to be, I think, more revelations about the Iran thing. And Iran, somebody had pointed out last time that they'd like to see a rundown. Oh, I was on with the shills, and somebody had pointed out because we were discussing the U.S. history in Iran, and most Americans don't know it. We overthrew the elected government in Iran in 1952. It's just, this isn't up for debate. This is what the United States did. And our history in Iran has not been very good since then. There's a lot of very good reasons for them to be pissed at us, and I think there's a lot of us deliberately painting Iran as an evil regime, in part to make them evil because they don't have all that many other choices but to go deal with Russia because they can't deal with anyone else. And in large part to make it so that people don't sit there and ask questions like, how did Iran end up here? Because the way Iran ended up with the Ayatollah was because that was the only way to get rid of an American puppet, and they were not going to be under the thumb of the U.S. for anything. And then you went from a country where women could wear two-piece tops and do really crazy shit like go to school, and where the education system was comparable to what we had in the West. And you go to where they are now. That was the U.S., ladies and gentlemen. And the U.S. didn't mean to do that, admittedly. But it was a direct consequence of the U.S. It's our fault, period. So we'll discuss that. That may be, speaking of nick of time, I think we're going to do that. We would like to do a few other things. So we're going to get on that. Let's see. And I think that's okay. I think I've just about gone through the live chat. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the live chat. You guys have been very patient. This stream has gone on a little longer than we like to do for a rundown, but it's an unprecedented time in American history. If Trump is indicted, keep in mind, so when every political party, and the U.S. has two political parties, has a leader, somebody who represents them. The de facto leader of the political party in power is the President of the United States, and they often don't work day to day with the party, but they are the leader of that party. Trump is still technically the leader of the Republican Party. He's also a nominee for the President of the United States, and he's also a former president. None of those have ever been indicted in the U.S. If Trump is indicted, he will be the first former president, the first leader of a major U.S. political party, and the first candidate on a major political party that I'm aware of. That one, I haven't researched that, but I'm pretty sure he's the first I've heard of that would be indicted. So, and I'll be honest too, as much as I like making fun of him, and that's a way to blow off some steam, I hope his mugshot isn't circulated around and all this other stuff, because at that point you're just trying to humiliate him. You're just trying to make him look bad. Nobody does that better than him. I don't think he needs help. B, we've got him on so much genuine shit for which he needs to get nailed. This is why I used to defend George W. Bush a lot. I was not a fan of George W. Bush, but I had to defend him because he kept getting attacked by people who just hated him so much they made shit up. Doesn't make it any easier to actually get people when they fuck up, and he fucked up a lot. don't do their jobs for them. That's why I appreciated that question. Could Stormy Daniels have blackmailed him? Yes. I don't think she did, but somebody should look into that. Absolutely. Yep. Trump deserves I am proud to be in a country where Trump is going to get the absolute same rights and privileges as everyone else. The very rights and privileges he's trying to take from me by saying my vote doesn't count because the guy I voted for doesn't belong in office. Fuck Trump. Having said that, we'll let the law do it. So thank you all for joining us. And again, join us on the Discord. You can keep up with all of this. Not sure. We may be in standby for tomorrow. It depends ultimately on whether or not, how confident we are that he's going to. We'll follow that up. A couple other good shows I already outlined. We're going to talk about Peter Zahn, the Why China Will Not Survive the Decade. And we'll have Operator Starsky and Commander McMillan. So thank you all so much for joining us and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a good night all.